Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 160. And it's about boundaries. And boundaries is a word that you see all the time in what I have taken to calling Instagram psychology. I'm absolutely certain that you have seen this too, even if you're not on Instagram. And I think the thing that we can agree on is that as a group of humans existing, we've aged out of this kind of politeness culture where saying no is rude and agreed that boundaries are a good thing. And even though that seems to be the common opinion, let's decide why they're a good thing. For one, I think they're a good thing because they give you a framework from which to operate in a healthy way for yourself. For example, in the Audacity Project, during week 6, when we talk about money, I have everyone consider their bottom line. Now, this is an amount for which when they're working in exchange for money and offering their service, they will know that this is the least amount of money that they can accept and still feel valued and not feel grumpy and resentful. And the reason this is helpful is because when someone offers you an opportunity, you want to say yes to it. The scarcity sets in. It's like, well, what if nothing else ever comes up for me ever again and no one ever invites me to do anything again? You're like, you feel that urge to just say, yes, I'll do it. I'll not even ask what the rate is or if there is one. And by asking my students to set a bottom line for themselves, that acts as a boundary, an external boundary. It is a framework so that when they're offered an opportunity, they already have that limit set. So they don't have to rely on the burgeoning emotions that come up when you're offered something. It's like, just take it, because they know they've already made the decision for themselves not to go below the bottom line. That's a boundary. So it makes it easier to make choices that are congruent with your value system. Because you sit down, you have a think, you decide what's best for you right now in this current incarnation in which you are living, and make a choice. Setting a boundary like that is a hard cognitive load. We're not all sitting around having deep, meaningful thoughts every minute of the day because it's a high cognitive load. So by front-loading the work and putting in the cognitive load intentionally, when opportunities come up, invitations arise, you don't have to do that labor. You already did it. So it's helpful to protect your integrity. So that's one reason the boundaries are good. They're good for you for that reason. They're also good for other people. You may have heard this axiom that we kind of train people how to treat us, which is something that I do agree with and have observed a lot. Now, this does not mean that every treatment you get from someone else is a direct reflection of you, but it does mean, if we're being really brutally honest, that we are pretty often complicit in our own dehumanization by other people, in what we accept. Also, other people seeing you setting boundaries, but also defending them, gives them permission to do the same. You lead by example, and you may never know about it, but people are watching. Like if, let's say, you are a coach and you have poor boundaries. On the one hand, it looks like this is really good for your students because they have so much access to you, and you won't be saying no to them. You'll respond to them at 10 p.m. And yeah, from the outset, it looks like a good situation for the student. They're getting more of you. However, should this student go on to become a coach themselves, which is extraordinarily likely, what you've modeled for them as a coach with poor boundaries is someone who is always on tap. So they will model themselves after the design that they've seen work. And this is how we get chains of people burn out and with compassion fatigue and frankly unable to mind themselves. And I know that probably sounds harsh, and I don't really mean for it to, but I'm just so over it, my good people. And I love that phrase, mind yourself, because I'll tell you a little story. There is a wonderful artist and coach, so gifted and so hardworking. This particular artist doesn't just have poor boundaries, they have fucking no boundaries. And as a result, it's become expected by the people who work with them regularly, like, oh, they're going to be amazing until they get burnout and resentful, and then they're going to turn into a huge bitch and snipe at people and stop talking and stop contributing and fill the room with this poisonous fog. It's become expected behavior because there's no boundaries. And I was discussing this with a close friend of mine who's also worked with this artist a lot. And I was saying how it's such a shame that they have this sort of cycle that they seem to become trapped in, which isn't good for anyone. And my friend said, well, they can't mind themselves. And I was just like, damn, that is a really concise way of summing that up. So here's my beef with boundaries the way that we seem to be talking about them lately in the zeitgeist, in Instagram psychology, is that it comes from this really defensive stance. For example, so-and-so disrespected my boundary, string them up. Or you stated a boundary really clearly and your coworker repeatedly disrespected it or trespassed against it or ignored it. So now we quit our jobs or we turn them into HR. Now this depends on the boundary. If this is sexual assault or harassment, yeah, turn them into HR. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I see friendships where a boundary is placed by one friend. The other friend forgets or ignores the boundary, and the friend who initiated the boundary feels attacked and disrespected and chooses to freeze out the other friend. They're no longer friends, no longer a relationship. None of this is to say that people shouldn't respect your boundaries. Like, obviously, I think that would be great. And I hope we all have such people in our lives. But if we just stonewall anyone who trespasses on a boundary that we've set, if we set it one time, you're going to have a very limited kind of person in your life to interact with. But my real beef with it is what it does to the person who's like trying to do good for themselves and set boundaries, is that when these boundaries inevitably are tested, they end up feeling victimized and then they isolate themselves. I could have probably summarized this entire episode by saying boundaries are not for other people to observe. Boundaries are for you. Let's use a little story. This example is super easy to remember. It is from my dear Uncle Bradley. Bradley was taking a nap and his phone rang and it woke him up, and he answered the phone and it was his best friend. His best friend was just like, blah, 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 blah. Here's a bunch of stuff about me, and talked for a while. And then the best friend goes, so what are you doing? And Bradley says, actually, I was taking a nap. And without missing a beat, the best friend says, well, you ignorant bitch, turn off your cell phone, and hung up. End scene. I love this story. And when Bradley was telling me this story, this was a very long time, like 15 years ago, he told me this story, but it stuck with me because then Brad was like, he wasn't wrong. And also the reason I am good at boundaries is in no small part from watching Brad. Brad taught me so much about not only setting a boundary, but defending it and where the responsibility lies in that. And that was the point of that story. I was I was raised to be very polite and soft, and to care for other people's feelings. I'm great at that. And with this training comes, let's say you get an invitation to something that you really don't want to do. The way that it had become second nature to me to respond to this was like, oh yeah, maybe, I'll see, let me check, because that sounds great. Basically lying. I didn't mean any of those things. I didn't want to do the thing. And when I was getting to know Bradley as an adult, I was 25, and I would invite him to something, and he'd say, oh, no, I'm not doing that. And this both shocked and delighted me. I was like, I didn't know that you could just say no without trying to cushion the blow and protect someone else's feelings and wrap them in cotton wool to protect them from your no. But it was so clear, and it was so kind. It was truly an act of love. And so, I learned a lot just by following his example. And now I very much enjoy doing the same thing. Like, I got invited out to dinner a couple of weeks ago. They're like, when we'll meet at 8:30. I was like, nope, not going to do that. No. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't wrap it in cotton wool. I'm like, that is too late for me. How about 6? And if that doesn't work for you, let's have lunch someday. And you'll know when you're doing this well, because people will start thanking you for your boundaries. They will start observing it and acknowledging it in gratitude. Like, thank you for that. Now I know. Way to defend those boundaries. Like, no problem. I don't eat dinner at 8:30. I better have a cat on my lap at 8:30. And if you're near the beginning of your journey, shall we call it, with setting and defending your own boundaries, I want you to know that I have nothing but compassion for why people pleasing is a thing, a cage that is so difficult to escape from. And it's because that's how you have found safety, by being approved of. Ask me how I know. But what I have learned is that the acceptance of other people didn't keep me safe. It made some inner child part of me feel safe, but it wasn't safety. It was guaranteed burnout, followed by resentment and one-sided friendships. And part of this comes from, can you guess what I'm about to say? Can you guess? Patriarchy. Under patriarchy, we are taught very subliminally, but very certainly, that power resides in being chosen. I'll say that again, that power resides in being chosen. That's why you can create a whole ass show and stage it all by yourself, with your team of friends and co-conspirators, and still feel like a failure because your only internal metric for real success is having been chosen by someone else. You did the thing. You did an amazing thing, but you weren't chosen, so it doesn't feel legitimate. Power is not found in being chosen. If you're chosen, you have proximity to someone else's power, not your own. And proximity to power is not power. Just ask Marjorie Taylor Greene. Just kidding. Don't talk to her. Fuck her. Also, fuck Donald Trump. Have we said that yet today? I don't think we've said it yet. And as of this moment, I don't have a better definition of power for you. It is something that I am deeply interested in and love observing and studying the energetics of. So I don't have a better definition yet. I will, but I do know that it's not proximity to someone else's power. So that's the beef I really wanted to cover today, is that there seems to be this understanding of boundaries being placed as a way to sort of try and control other people's behavior and to protect ourselves from discomfort. But boundaries are not a tool to control how other people treat us. They are a tool to determine how we respond. So that when there is an opportunity to make a choice, that's when boundaries come into play, because we get to use those to respond to the opportunity with integrity. So I really reject this notion that we set a boundary and then sit back and wait for the world to respond. I'm not trying to downplay, the initial setting of a boundary, especially if it's new for you, is very hard. And like, you should be congratulated for that. But it's the beginning of the work. It's not the end of the work. The nature of boundaries is that they will be tested. Because it's not a code for other people to adhere to. It's a code for you to adhere to. So the next time someone oh so rudely or unintentionally trespasses against a boundary that you have laid out, I hope that in addition to anything else you might be feeling about it, you can also feel excitement, because now it's your cue has been called. You're ready for your close-up. Or, in the immortal words of Tom Dempster, you ignorant bitch, turn off your cell phone. I'm looking at the time, my friends. I want to thank you for spending this time with me and letting me talk in your ear on my little digital soapbox. I appreciate you listening so much. And I know I've said it, that this is a really unilateral form of communication. It's really one-sided. So anytime I get a message from someone who listens to the podcast, and they're like, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but no, I don't. I really don't hear it all the time. So thank you. Thank you for saying the things. I'll also make a request that if this was helpful to you, useful to you, or even just entertaining, could you share it with someone that you think could use it? I would appreciate that as well. If you have requests for future episodes, please let me know on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. Low Work December is coming up, so during December, episodes and June tend to be a little bit shorter, more like the 15-minute mark than the 20-minute mark. And I may batch them, so don't be shy. This podcast is powered by Patreon, so extra special shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for standing with me and trusting me, and for making this podcast and so much more possible. I could not do this without you. Until next time, my friends, enjoy the hell out of that integrity and don't go back to sleep.